Hello, everybody. Welcome. Hello, Michael. And hello.
Hello. No, go on.
You're looking up at something, are you?
Helicopters are just flying overhead,
Okay, okay.
looking out the window to see if I can spot it. Uh,
Well, here we are again for another week. I have to say, you set us homework last week, which was to notice that, death and decay and dying around us. And, a little bit painful exercise, I'm guessing, for some, if they've remembered to do it. We've often talked about, a foot in both camps, that, you live, or for people that are interested in the spiritual world, you read and you seek to understand it better. But of course, we're here in physical bodies living on this earth, and it all feels very real. So quite confronting to look at the pain of things going on.
well, yes, of course it is. And you might remember I sort of urged people not to dwell on it.
A good reminder.
But I did stress that it's useful because it was in the material. That Arjuna is seeing the vision of God or the Lord or Brahman, the destructive side of him. That there's this one. We need to understand that we come, we exist, and we go. And that's everything in the creation.
It's
And
painful for us human beings, isn't it?
yes, yeah, we don't like it. No,
No, we don't like it at
we
all, and
like
it
to
hurts.
come, we like to stay, but we don't like to go.
We
But
like the homework that revolves around looking at the beauty of
yes,
creation,
yes,
the
of course.
sun
Yes,
rises and the flowers blooming.
yes.
But the other end, I'm guessing people might be a little bit confronted.
Well, if they are, that'll be good in a sense. And the reason I say that, Jackie and listeners, is that um, uh, and I've touched on it. Like you've got to get your head around it. You're going to die. I don't want to start this session saying you're going to all die. Well, we are, and get used to it. And the reason I'm stressing it, and the reason it's in the teaching and it gets stressed, and in all the teachings, Jesus died, Krishna died, Buddha died, everyone dies, is that by being aware of it, understanding it, it takes a lot of the fear and the angst out of dying and death. Society, humans don't like talking about death. Yeah. You go to funerals and everyone's somber and they say, oh, yeah, that person was lovely and we're sorry to see them go. But everyone walks out thinking they're never going to be in that position, in a sense. One way they know, but in another way they hope that it doesn't happen to them. So it's just part of the teaching. And I can assure listeners that if they haven't already sort of worked that out, that by understanding it as it's described, and that everything in the creation, so nothing can escape it, that if you're born, you're going to have an existence, and then that existence is going to cease. And if you understand that, well, then you don't have to think about it for the rest of your life. You just go ahead, and any notion of death or thought or, I'm feeling sick or something, you'll feel sick, you'll feel this, you'll feel that, but it won't have the same fear. So really all I'm trying to say in a nutshell is that we fear the unknown. Anything that's unknown, a human being will fear, or any living creature. If you know it, well, then you've got a chance then of coming to terms with it one way or another. In other words, accepting it as being inevitable, and then the fear basically disappears.
But
So
particularly when we link in that it's that death of the body and the continuity of the true self, the soul continues on.
yeah, and that's very useful for you to be reminding everyone of that too, Jackie. I would have just sort of skipped over that, but that's it. I made it clear, didn't I, last session, that the only part of us that dies is this physical body. It's just like a set of clothes that don't fit anymore. We get rid of them and we buy a new set. Car that's 50 years old, it doesn't go anymore. You get rid of it, you got to buy a new one. Well, the body gets 70 years old, it doesn't work anymore. You get rid of it and you get a new one with the next rebirth. But with that has to be an understanding and an acceptance that there's a continuous cycles of births and deaths. That you don't, if you're only thinking you live in this one lifetime, well, then you think it's going to be hard to convince you that when you die, you're going to continue on. You'll think, yes, you do. I have died. And all the people at the funerals and everything that haven't got this knowledge, they all feel very sad because they think Johnny or Mary's died. They don't understand that it's only the body that's in the coffin that's died, and the actual being will have another lifetime. It's a big concept, I know, but
yeah, good to touch on again, and I suspect it's relevant given we were focusing on dying things around us through the week.
This is the teachings of the Gita, and I've stressed at the start of the sessions that, to me, the teachings of the Gita as a one-off book is the greatest book that any person on the planet can read, understand, and live by, and live a much happier, contented life. There
Beautiful.
are others that are nearly as good or equal in, in a sense. I guess, we've all got our personal preference, that deal with the teachings of any of the great masters, and they teach you that as well. But I feel the Gita does it in these chapter by chapter, logical, sequential teachings. We've already touched a number of times on 6 chapters that we focused on the human being. These 6 chapters that we're nearly finished now are focusing on the higher aspect, which is part of us as well. And then the last 6 chapters are going to sort of bring those two together. If people who have started with podcast 1 and are still continuing now and will continue to the end, they'll get and I said at the start, didn't I, Jacqui, that all I could do in these sessions is give a brief glimpse, a brief overview of what's in there, just so people can become aware of the enormity of it and the depth of the teachings, and they'll eventually have to study it at a finer level.
Beautiful.
But I've probably made their job a lot easier, Jacqui, I think, with these podcasts.
Of course. Accessible, bringing these themes forward in an accessible way is what we're about.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully all of that's a nice segue into your material for today. What have you got in store for us?
It is. It's always very useful, as you have heard me say many times, revising and that. I'll just touch on that in the first 6 lines on what we've sort of talked about. But having it as one of these little one-on-one conversations we have, the feedback I'm getting and you're getting is that the viewers are loving it and they're finding that all very rewarding and so on. So hello to you, Jacqui, and listeners. Hope you've all been keeping well, and lovely to be with you all again. And I believe, Jacqui, that you're a year older now than you were when we did our last podcast. Is that correct?
I am. Another turn around the sun.
Happy birthday to you, and I think I could say that on behalf of all the listeners.
Thank you, everybody.
That I'm very close to these days. So happy birthday to you.
Thank you.
So we continue on today, Jacqui and listeners, with part 2 of chapter 11, which was titled, or is titled, The Vision of the Lord's Form. So in chapter 10, we had a description of the Lord's form, and then Arjuna asked the Lord, could he show himself? And so in this chapter 11, he's had a visual interpretation or understanding. So in last week's podcast, Arjuna asked Krishna to show or manifest himself, which he did. He saw on the one hand numerous visions of his full glory, splendour and power. Next, on the other hand, he saw numerous visions of terror, fierceness, destruction and death, which we've just been discussing, Jacqui. Overwhelmed with both adoration and fear, Arjuna surrenders to the cosmic form. So here it says adoration and fear. So this is what I'd be hoping that we're all picking up on now, that we're more and more adoring what we're learning about the higher self, but also understanding that there is this death component that goes with it. So Arjuna surrenders to in overwhelmed with both adoration and fear, Arjuna surrenders to the cosmic form. Shaking with fear, with folded hands, he prostrates to Krishna, and with trembling lips that could barely talk, Arjuna says, "My Lord, thou art the primal God, the ancient, the supreme abode, being and not being, the knower and the knowledge. Thy form is infinite, imperishable Purusha, and the first cause." So there's about 6 or 8 definitions of God or consciousness or the absolute all wrapped up in one sentence. That's how excited he is, Jacqui, at having seen this vision. And we're talking seen in inverted commas, an inner vision that God's given him special ability to see. But that's the ability we've all got to see when we have a spiritual experience. It's describing that exactly. So he says, he goes on with that. He's saying, it's only natural that the world revels and rejoices when it sings the praises of thy glory. The demons flee in fear, and the saints offer you their salutations. Honour and glory to thee 1,000 and 1,000 times. Within you the cosmos rests safely, and into you it'll dissolve. So again, this reference comes from you, goes back into you, ceases to exist. You are rightly called the supreme absolute reality. So absolute reality or reality is another term for consciousness. So that's after he's had the vision, that's Arjuna's words to Krishna, thanking him for it. And you can hear from those words, can't you, listeners, that he's overjoyed. And this is what happens with us when we have any spiritual experiences. The depth of that understanding and full knowing is there, and we get quite excited about it. It's very meaningful for us. It's very important for us to have these episodes. Anything you'd like to add here at this point, Jacqui?
No, but just to agree with you that I think those moments in life where we all just have a little bit more clarity and depth and insight, they're those sort of aha moments where you just sort of think, oh, like I really understand that more deeply. They are meaningful. They make a big difference.
Yep. And I'm sure many of our listeners, all of our listeners to some extent or other, are all following all this and understanding it. Some have had these sorts of glimpses, maybe to even a very large extent. So, but this is just explaining, and if it hasn't happened to you, don't worry. If you keep on down this path on your spiritual journey, somewhere along the line, these visions and understandings and true knowings unfold. One has to, here, remember Arjuna asked, if you think I'm worthy of it, show me your vision. And that was, I was stressed on that's a critical part. He wouldn't have given it to Arjuna if he wasn't at the state of on his spiritual journey and was such a keen seeker, as we've seen over the course of all these podcasts, constantly asking questions, constantly probing, constantly wanting to sort it all out and putting it all into practice. And so that's how that's the true meaning of worship, reshaping ourselves to make ourselves worthy to receive God or the Lord or consciousness.
I think even for people, even if they haven't had what they would term a spiritual experience, I think people still know those moments through, and maybe you would even call this a small one, I'm not sure, but I'm just thinking about when people move through life and all of a sudden they just understand a situation or themselves more clearly, or they read something in a book and they just have a moment of stopping and like rereading it and something just kind of clicks inside.
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily sure if I would always call that a spiritual experience, because sometimes they feel a bit more every day, but those moments that sort of stop you in your tracks a little bit, where you can just tell something's happening internally, something's shifting, gears are changing, your level of understanding is deeper or up leveled in some way. That's often a good beginning.
Yep. Again, beautifully put. It's a lovely thing to say. I do call those a spiritual experience, but we needn't get too worried about whether you think it isn't, and I think it is. The important thing is that what you've just described there, Jacqui, that I call a little spiritual experience, is simply this. That's the higher part of you that you're saying something shifted inside me. It's not your mind and your emotions, because that would have told you that all along. So it's a different part of you that suddenly said, that gets jolted and says, that's your observer, that's your higher self, that's your buddhi operating. It's above your mind and it's above your emotions. And at that moment those moments you describe, it registers with the person. So does that make sense?
That's lovely. I'm sure people will find usefulness in that.
if it's different, folk, to what you normally experience in your everyday life and have, and you notice that it's different to the extent that you've just described, Jacqui, well, that's out of your ordinary human mind, thinking mind, and emotional aspect, because that can't observe what you've just described. It has to be another source, and that's our higher self, and we call that the observer or the witness. So in any time something like that happens, it's you're operating from that higher perspective of, or your true nature, really, is a nice way to say it. Very good. All right, so at this point, Arjuna feels obliged to offer an apology to Krishna. He tells him, this might seem strange to people, Jacqui, but they've grown up as young friends from when they were tiny boys. And so they would have hee-hawed, and he might have called him, you silly old goose or something like that. Now, as he's getting to know him and that, he's thinking, geez, this is God. And I've said, whatever, I could have punched him, in a wrestle and stuff like that. So he feels at this stage obliged to offer him an apology. He tells him that because he hadn't really comprehended his greatness in the past, he merely regarded him as just a mortal friend. In hindsight, and with much greater awareness now, he realizes his lack of reverence to such an exalted personage. So, and I'm going to refer to this in just a few minutes, Jacqui, so you can come in there. He begs Krishna to forgive him for any disrespect or familiarity, insult or immoderate behavior in the past. I ask thy forgiveness for them all, Arjuna tells Krishna. Imploring thus, Arjuna bows with great reverence to that divine form. So I've written in the next couple of lines, Jacqui, to sort of clear it up for you and for the listeners. It might be worth pondering, Jacqui and listeners, that we, as we advance on our spiritual journey and our awareness of the divine grows, that we also are starting to have moments like these. Do you understand what I'm getting at here, Jacqui?
Yeah, I understand completely. I'm just thinking back to a few years ago when I was in Bali. I'd just finished teaching a yoga retreat, and I was swapping over as our retreat was finishing, another retreat was beginning. And it was one of my yoga teachers, Lucille, who's an older woman and has definitely been a very strong teaching figure in my life. And I remember we were sitting there debriefing, just sharing a cup of tea, and I was debriefing about how my retreat went, and she was giving me some insight into her retreat. And she said something so profound, and I actually have no idea what. I can't remember that at all, but that's not the important part. She just said something so profound, and it's like the world just stopped for a moment. And I just looked at her and thought, I mean, I already adored her immensely, and I'm so grateful. I've learned so much from her over the course of my life. So I've always had strong reverence for her and gratitude. But I looked at her in this moment and just thought, I've been fooled. Like, you're just sitting here looking like an elderly, well-dressed, well-composed Western woman, and you're like something else entirely. And it was just this profound moment where like the world stopped, where I just looked at her with fresh eyes and thought, I've been fooled. Even though I appreciated her enormously, there was just this moment of recognition. I've been fooled. You have been teaching us such wisdom. And because you look so normal, perhaps people haven't really taken it in as deeply as they could have. It's exactly what you're saying here.
Exactly, Jacqui. You're just transcribing, well, I say just, not minimising it, but transcribing it onto Lucille. But the sentiment that you're describing is exactly what I've just read out and what I wanted to get across, or hope would get across. And once again, you've nailed it beautifully, Jacqui. That's exactly what it means. So as for everyone now, the question, oh, I'll leave it to the homework, because that's that'll be your homework or the exercise for the week. So very nicely stated, Jacqui, and using these personal observations that you are so good at doing makes it a lot easier. It marries in with what I'm saying here, which is like sort of, if you like, the pure teaching. Then you give it a personal interpretation. And between the two of us, it, I think, makes it very, very clear for anyone watching or listening to these podcasts. All
I
right?
agree. We're a good combination.
Yes. At this point in the chapter, has to be, Jacqui, you're my daughter. At this point in the chapter, Arjuna is starting to feel somewhat exhausted, jaded, and drained. He's been through an enormous spiritual experience, and people who have had any of these big experiences, Jacqui, yourself included, myself included, it does, the physical body feels it. It's not a nasty sort of draining or exhaustion. It just, the being's overwhelmed by the enormity of what the person's experienced in that spiritual realm. Hard to describe, but I think people pretty much would understand what I'm saying. So at this point in the chapter, Arjuna is starting to feel, I mentioned that. So he says to Krishna, I rejoice that I've seen what man has never seen before, this rare vision. Yet, O Lord, I am overwhelmed by fear and can no longer perceive your cosmic form. Please have mercy on me and take again the form I know. Show me you as you were before. Let me see the familiar shape that I know. So he's had the vision. He's got what he needs to get out of it. The first part I read out. You're so great. You're so beautiful. You're so perfect. But now he's saying he's feeling a bit overwhelmed. Can we stop this now and go back to where we are in the chariot, and you're there in your human form? So Lord Sri Krishna replied, my beloved friend, it is only through my grace and power that you have been able to see this vision. Rarely indeed does one gain this vision. You are exceptional in receiving this grace from me. Notice the references that I've been saying, Jacqui? You're exceptional in receiving this grace from me. You've got to be ready. He's saying you're exceptional. You're doing great work. You're interested. So this is what your reward is. Remember early in the piece when you mentioned something about you thought, it was like a gift to you. And I wanted to stress straight away that it is a gift, but it's a gift you've given yourself, really, earned for yourself. It doesn't just come. People don't just get gifts. God's loving and kind and generous, but he says he's a little bit of a strict parent. He says, I'll give you some gifts, but you show me that you'll be appreciative of them and that you're worthy for them. So he says, even though striving through spiritual practices, sacrifice, rituals or study and so on have not gained this ultimate experience. So he's saying everything we've learned up until now isn't going to give you that experience that Arjuna's just had. And I'll elaborate this as to where it goes from there. So what we're looking at here now, Jacqui and listeners, is what begins to happen to seekers of truth when the practices listed above strengthen within us. So we've all been putting into practice getting the knowledge, haven't we? We've put that spiritual knowledge into everyday living. We've learned to do actions for sacrifice. In other words, meeting the need, not for personal gain. The personal gain will come, but the top priority should be serving the need. We've learned that when we're doing all that and observing what's happening, we become wiser. Becoming wiser then leads us to want to become stiller. So we take on meditation. And then having all of these practices pretty much under, not under full control, but certainly aware of all of that. This is where we've been coming through. What's happening now with these last few chapters is that by looking at the workings of who God is, what God is, and how it exists and its powers and so on, we're learning to have a higher regard for it, a greater love, a greater devotion, which is what you described when you were saying, when you looked at Lucille, was it Lucille you said?
Yes.
Name? Yeah.
Yes.
That's what you saw. And this is what Arjuna is seeing in Krishna. And this is what we'll all see as we continue what we're doing more and more frequently and at a greater force as we continue on our journey. So he says, This is what happens when the practices listed above strengthen within us. Naturally, our devotion, our love for God grows. Yeah, naturally. It's a sequence, it's a progression. You don't start off saying, oh, I'm going to just start being devoted and love God. It's too big a jump. The being's got to do step by step and work up to that. This is the end of the teaching, really, in the sense of understanding your lower nature and your higher nature. So this is, as I say, basically finishing it all up. So this is where eventually the individual being has these profound experiences. This is a natural part of the spiritual journey, which many of you may, to some extent or other, have already experienced. Well, you certainly experienced it in that moment you just shared, Jacqui, a few minutes ago, right? That is profound, and that is full clarity of what I'm reading out here and what we're discussing. So these last 6 chapters that we've been studying, Jacqui and listeners, describing the qualities and the manifestations of Lord Brahman, have steadily increased our understanding, which in turn leads to greater love or devotion to the Lord. So we've been going up, 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 up. And devotion and love to the Lord is as high as any human being can go. There's no more you can do. You start off with the knowledge, you put it into practice, you perform good actions, you get stiller and wiser, you meditate, and then you get more devoted to God. But you have to know all of those steps along the way, what you're doing, why you're doing it, and so on. So this is how it all builds step by step, as I keep saying, and eventually it'll come to a conclusion, which we know is called self-realization or enlightenment. I was going to ask you here if you got anything to say, but I think you've said enough at this stage, Jacqui, so we'll keep on going because I'm mindful of the time. Lord Sri Krishna now shows himself to Arjuna in his gentle form and consoles his devotee who had lately trembled with fear. So remember, at the start he was exalted, he was happy as Larry, then he saw the destructive side, which you started off with at the start. That wasn't so good, but it has to be understood nevertheless. And then having seen the whole thing and understood it all, he's full of love and devotion to the Lord. Realises his total magnificence. This is starting to now understand, Jacqui, that this consciousness, this absolute, this God, brings about the whole creation, everything we understand in the creation. It sustains the whole creation during its whole period of creation. It's like the electricity. If consciousness disappears, it's all gone. And then at the end of the creation, the whole creation will dissolve and become nothing. So that's that death part or the destruction part of it. So that same entity brings it into existence, keeps it going during its existence, and is there at the completion of its existence. All 3 stages. And it's got to be an enormous entity that can do all of that. Yeah. And it's got the different gods that have got different names that are all different helpers, but they can't do anything if they haven't got that ultimate source, that reality, as I referred to before. So, and then relieved Arjuna says, seeing in thee in thy gentle human form, I am myself again calm once more. So he's back side by side in the chariot and everything is sort of back to normal for a while. And now Krishna concludes his teachings, Jacqui, in chapter 11 with a short summary of the way to reach the Supreme Being. And I already touched on these a few times previously, but also even in today's session, so I'll whip through them pretty quickly. He says to Arjuna, it's extremely difficult to obtain the vision you just had. Even the gods are always longing to see me in this aspect. People think that the gods and that they've already seen all this. Gods have still got a lot of work to do as well. He's making it clear to Arjuna that even most of them haven't seen him in that true form that Arjuna's just visualized. there's more on that, but I haven't got time to go into that at this stage. He explains to him that all the efforts that he's made thus far in his spiritual journey, and this is a quick summary of them, Jacqui, that I've reiterating again, in gaining new knowledge, transferring it into right action, sacrifice and austerities, have led him to become wiser and most beneficial to purifying his mind. But these alone will not be sufficient for a seeker to seek the vision that you have just had. Only by plunging into deep meditation, which leads one to pure devotion, that is unswerving, single-minded love known as bhakti, can I be seen and known. And that reference to bhakti, Jacqui, is devotion, the Sanskrit word for devotion. So they said that there's 3 paths, 3 yogas to reach the supreme. One is the bhakti, yoga, or the path of knowledge, jnana yoga. The other one is action yoga, karma yoga. And the third one is devotion yoga, bhakti yoga. They're the 3. And eventually we all have a strong point there. I'm basically a knowledge person. But as I mastered that to some degree or other, I was able to understand and grasp the devotional aspect to a fair extent. But others can come in strongly with the devotional aspect, but then they'll need the others. I've had some Buddhist nuns come to the session. One started off as a Christian nun, a Catholic nun, then she transferred and became a Buddhist nun. And then she realised that she was an elderly lady, about 70 when she joined. I asked her why she was there. And she said, well, all my life I've been praying. Prayer is a form of devotion, my love for God. They take vows that they marry God, all of those sorts of things. But she said, I'm here because I feel I'm not understanding really what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. I love being devotional, but I'm not so, it doesn't sort of all come together. So that's why all the 3 parts, the knowledge part was important to her, even at that late stage in life.
And that's a nice reminder too, that no matter how old we are, we continue to have capacity to learn. Because I think sometimes people get older and just feel like they're set in their ways and their understanding is their understanding and they're just aging and the health decline is on. It's such a good reminder that we continue. We have capacity. Well, whether we continue is a person's individual choice, but we have capacity to continue to grow and learn until the end.
Again, you're making a very valid and truthful statement. And I agree with it 100%. You're never too old in one sense. But nevertheless, and I'd certainly be urging our younger listeners and middle-aged listeners and that notion of make hay while the sun shines.
Yes. Let's not leave it to the end.
Yeah.
But should you find yourself nearer to the end, keep going.
Yeah. There's while you're drawing, folk, while you're still drawing breath, there's hope, and it can all come together very, very quickly. The only point I'd just add there is, and I'm sure everyone's aware of it, that as we get older, not only the body gets more tired and can't do what it used to, but the mind starts slowing down as well. And it's hard to, we don't have the same drive and the same strength and the same energy that we did, 10 years before and 20 years before and that. So everyone can understand that and relate. But what you're saying is 100% correct. It doesn't matter how limited or how small amount of energy you got left, you can still use that to grow spiritually. So don't stop. The Upanishads say, the journey is long and arduous. It's like walking on the razor edge. But say, stop not until the goal is reached. So until we all draw our final breath, which we will one day, keep persevering. Keep going. Keep doing as much as you can in whatever way you can, whether it's action or whether it's knowledge or whether it's devotion.
It's a beautifully hopeful sentiment, isn't it?
Yep. And so doing all right, Jacqui, for a lot of discussions that we've had. This is the last bit.
Excellent.
Oh, I just had two lines to finish off there. So he says, only thus, having gone through all of these points I've just outlined, Jacqui and listeners, and this including the last part on deep meditation and devotion, love and devotion, only thus can any human know the essence of my supreme glory and become one with me, O Arjuna. So we're talking here the essence, the spirituality part of the being. But that's not impossible, Jacqui and our listeners. Now that you've all heard that summary, that's it. All that has to be done now, when I say that's it, all that has to be done now is just polish up all those half dozen aspects. Keep improving and keep enlarging and keep working on them. But what I'm meaning is no more is there's not going to be another 6 in the next volume or something like that. That's all the teaching, all the different major points in people's armor or toolkit, and we just like when we go to primary school, you start off in prep grade, and your reading is just John and Betty, isn't it? Yeah. By the time you get through primary school and high school, you don't go back from high school back to prep grade again and start all over again. So you keep building, and it all comes together at the finish. And then I'll just finish off here with the quote of the last verse, Jacqui, in chapter 11. And Krishna sums it up beautifully. He says in the final verse of the chapter, Krishna sums it all up beautifully. So therefore, O Prince, he says, dedicate all your actions to me. Work for me alone with no attachments or selfish desires. Make me your exclusive goal. Take refuge in me. Love me wholeheartedly and bear no malice toward any creature, and then you will reach me. That's all it in a nutshell, Jacqui. Listeners. Powerful words to finish off on, Jacqui.
They're very powerful. Gee, something else comes to mind, and since we've got a little bit of time, I'll share this with you. Again, it's another one of these stories in my life that probably as, father and daughter and in normal conversation, I don't think I've ever shared with you. I'm tempted to call it a gift again, but I know you'll say it's not a gift, so we'll leave that to one side.
No, Jacqui, it is a gift. But when you first mentioned it, it was clear to me that you were thinking it's like as if I come here, knock on your door and say, here's a gift. Yeah. It's sort of out of the blue, and, God's giving you these gifts, and you're obviously going to relate to one now. But all I'm saying is that you're only getting it because you've earned it.
We don't know that at the time, though, do we?
No,
that's why it feels like a gift, because we don't necessarily feel that we've
but it's
not
important.
deserved it, but we don't understand why it happens, probably.
No.
Is the truth of it.
Yes, but you'll find that now that I'm mentioning this on a couple of occasions for you and the listeners, and the reason I'm doing it is because I do feel it's important, is that because if anyone's walking around just thinking, oh, someone's just waved a magic wand over my head, sprinkled some stardust or something like that, well, they're not understanding the truthful aspect of it. Yeah, I like truth, Jacqui, and I want to keep passing it across. And you might think it's only a little thing and that I'm being a bit quibbly or whatever, but I feel it's important that what you're going to describe now is a gift. There's no doubt about that. Krishna says to Arjuna, this is a gift I've given you. But he says, I've given it to you because you've proven yourself to be worthy to receive it. All right? And that's all I'm stressing.
Yes.
For you and for everyone else.
Okay.
Now, go on.
Good.
Share your story.
Because it feels like a gift. Was a very big gift, actually. Biggest gift of my life, although it's amazing how we can forget these things. But once this would have been maybe...
No, but see, you haven't forgotten.
Well, no, I haven't forgotten. But in day-to-day life, you forget.
Yes,
it only comes up now because we're speaking this language,
No one ever forgets any of these gifts, Jacqui. Go on.
Well, this was maybe 15 or 18 years ago. I was at a moving meditation circle that a friend had invited me for. I'd never been, didn't really, I was a meditator, but the notion of moving and meditation were new to me. Anyhow, in short, we moved and danced, and someone did something nearby. Someone screamed unexpectedly at the top of their lungs, and that the person was very, very close to me in physical proximity. And it gave me the absolute shock of my life, because my eyes were closed and the music was soft, and you're not expecting that to happen. But the shock of this person screaming so loudly and so unexpectedly next to me, instantly I just burst into tears and could not stop sobbing. And initially it felt like I was the tears felt from fear. I'm so frightened that this person in close proximity invaded me with that sound. But eventually the sobbing turned into something else. And I don't know that I felt anything necessarily in that moment, but there was certainly a big release from me. And I think at the end, we just sort of packed up and went home. Maybe there was more to that night. I don't recall, but whatever else happened, that's not memorable. I went home, I went to sleep. I would have had 2 or 3 little children at this point. I woke up the next day, and as you can imagine, we've touched on this before. For anyone who's been or done parenthood and you've done little kids, you know that life is challenging. You're in the thick of it. You're always tired or exhausted or stressed or strained, or you're busy or you're running people around. So life is not perfect and it's not rosy. But I woke up this next day after that event had taken place, and it was like the world was just fresh. I was completely and utterly centered and still and unperturbed. And it's like life still happened. Kids did kids, I did school, lunchboxes got made, washing got done. Everything continued in the same fashion. But inwardly, nothing disturbed me. There was no noise, no chaos, no upset. It was absolute steadiness. This almost sounds unreal. I'm hearing myself say it, just thinking people will think she's making it up. This state lasted for 7 days. I kept waking up in the morning just thinking, surely it'll go back to normal. Surely I'll get upset or cranky or tired or go back to whatever was before. For 7 whole days, everything was perfect. And then on day 8, I woke up and life just went back to normal. But it's always stuck with me that 7 days is a very, very long amount of time. And my interpretation of that now looking back was that was a gift. And it showed me that I think that is the state of living in a self-realized capacity, that you realize who you are, that everything is absolute stillness and equilibrium, and you go about your business and you're still loving and you still tend things, but there's no chaos or I don't really know how to phrase it any better than that. But then it just disappeared and life went on. So
Yeah, well,
there's my sharing.
yeah, it's a lovely sharing, quite a profound one is again. Yeah, my little bit of contribution to what you're saying is that when that lady or the person, whoever it was, screamed next to you, and you sort of felt that shock in a sense, is that was obviously indicative of the deep state of meditation you were in and the deep connection you were having with the Lord, your higher self. And that jolted you out of that profound moment. And the tears.
Although my recollection wasn't that I was having a profound moment at that time.
Well, no, and but you said, you put your hand on your chest, didn't you? When you said that it took me out of the meditation. How did you describe that as that part?
Yeah, well, it was like a jolting. I don't remember being in a deep meditative state. Like my memory is not, I was in deep still meditation. I mean, we were moving and we were practicing. There must have been some inward activity going on, but nonetheless, what happened out here was so unexpected. It was just like a jolt to the nervous system, really, is what it felt like in that moment.
Yeah. And you said it brought you to tears?
Yeah, lots of tears. Well, I was frightened, to be honest, frightened for my life for a moment. I'd open my eyes and just check, who are you and what are you doing? And are you all right? Do I need to move 10 meters away? So just a moment to check, am I actually physically safe? Like that was the first instinct. but the tears obviously turned into something else. It almost felt like once I got over the fear of what had just happened and that I wasn't in danger of some sort, the process began from that point on, is really what it felt like at that time. Yeah.
Well,
Anyway, we don't have to dissect it. I just seemed relevant to share. It was kind of on point with gifts being given and getting insight into another way for an extended period of time.
Yeah. I would put to you just for your consideration, even though it was a long time ago, but it's a vivid memory. Is that there was even though there was movement and that, we can be moving or movement around us, but you're still inside. You must have been very still inside to feel that like a real shock. That's what happens when a person's in stillness and in deep meditation. Noises and everything are magnified enormously. That sort of pointing at your heart indicates clearly, that was part of where you were. The tears, hard to describe and understand. There's really two tears that human beings shed, Jacqui and listeners. One are called, simply tears of egoic tears, tears of woe is me. I've lost my job, my marriage is broken up, the children don't talk to me, I've been told I got cancer. People cry at any of those sorts of things. It's you've lost something that you cherish and whatever. So there's reasons for it, of course, but that's the reason. That's 99% of the reason and tears that people shed on the planet. There's another form of tears that are referred to in these great teachings, and they're called in Sanskrit Gadgada tears. They're tears of spiritual joy. They're the tears that I'm sure everyone's experienced that's listening. Sometimes you're at a concert or an opera or something like that, and the music's so beautiful, the tears just start rolling down your cheeks.
God, that happens to me all the time. I always think there's something wrong with me because I cry at the smallest little moments of beauty. Even at work, sometimes I can't stop myself.
Yeah, there's all forms of it. I'm just relating to obvious ones. Sunsets, sunrises. Usually in nature is where people. I remember looking out the window one time when I was taking a group at a cafe, a cafe session, philosophy cafe sessions, and there was like an outdoor area. And there were 3 or 4 mums sitting at a table outside. It was a beautiful spring day, and they all had prams. They obviously met to have a coffee and a chance to chat. Which you obviously do when you're tied up with young children and so on. And one mother had her back to me, but she had a baby over her shoulder, and the baby, not its face because it was sound asleep, but I could sort of see it side on. So there's this picture, a big a tree hanging there, the grass, and I've just glanced out, and it brought a tear to my eye. Just this little baby feeling so comfortable and secure that just even slung over its mum's shoulder. She's holding it sort of there, but it's there, sound asleep. The mums are all laughing and giggling and whatever. But that, so it can come anywhere under any circumstance. I'm taking a group and we're all talking and whatever. I've just glanced out and suddenly, there's this full awareness. So I suspect that they were Gadgada tears, Jacqui, that you might have been shedding. And that was because of the instant dislocation, if you like, or disconnection with that experience that you were having that you don't remember vividly, but I think it was there. But anyway, that's just something for you to ponder on. There was a sort of a loss of that sort of connection. And then it just all unfolded the way you're describing. For you to have those 7 days that you've just described, when you sort of were saying you're out of this world, like not in the mortal world, well, where did that come from? You're saying it's come from that experience that you had, and it lasted for 7 days. so that would reinforce what I'm saying, that you were having a very deep moment there when you were united with the self.
Yes, but I
And then,
always term it as a gift, because I didn't feel I worked hard for it or earned it. It just kind
well,
of unraveled, and I woke
yeah,
up one day and it was bliss.
well, keep calling it a gift. I don't care. It's what's happened to you. That's what I'm really discussing and adding to that. You sounded like you didn't sort of really understand that process, the scream and the state you were in and how you jolted. I'm just adding or giving my sort of understanding of it. Like over the years, Jacqui, I've had a lot of experiences and I've heard a lot of people share their experiences. There's really nothing I haven't heard. I don't want to be big noting myself or something, including your experience that I'm not aware of. So I'm just sort of contributing, a bit of my understanding or my interpretation onto it, and yeah, we just leave it at that.
And I think
Um,
people will be intrigued with the other sort of tiers. Remind us again what those tiers are called.
Gada, Gada, Gada tears. Translated, it means tears of spiritual joy. So
Beautiful.
the understanding is that's any time tears. I was given a lend of a book on Shankara many years ago. I'd never heard of the guy. A great guru from about 1200 years ago in India, Shankara. And I took it home and I started reading it one Sunday afternoon, just sitting in the lounge room by the fire. And I'd read barely half a page, and tears just started rolling down my cheeks. And this was early days for me. I hadn't, but it's a similar thing to what you're describing. I didn't know what Gadgata tears were then. Well, I was just totally puzzled. Why are tears rolling down my cheeks? I'm just reading this page of this book that I've started reading. But I came to understand a few years later, as my knowledge grew and as I read the book, that I'd actually had a previous lifetime where I'd been with this great master, and the memory kicked back just out of the blue as I'm reading this book about him. There was no one there to tell me or explain to me what had happened, but I was able to work it out. But it took a number of years. I had to get more knowledge and more, wider depths and stuff like that. And that's, what's happening in this situation you were saying about 18 years ago. Well, maybe, when you reflect on after we finish this section, that some of what I'm saying might be applicable or might have some sort of relevance. So anyway, it doesn't matter one way or another, but just, for what it's worth. So, all right, Jacqui, we've gone a little bit over. But it all good again. I'll just finish off with the exercise for the listeners.
Yes.
And as always, I try to keep it relevant to the chapter that we're doing. So this whole chapter 11, 1 and 2, but this is the culmination of it, has been on love and devotion. And I'm talking about how as we go on our spiritual journey, that's becomes a very critical part of the work we need to, to the level we need to get to, and to keep fostering and expanding within us. So the exercise for everyone, those of you interested in doing them, is just simply, are you becoming more aware that this aspect of devotion and love is growing stronger in you? Can you, and you've given us a couple of descriptions, Jacqui, where it relates to that. You're becoming more aware of this aspect. So just focus on that. A bit brighter than focusing on dying last week.
Yes. Far more
This time,
optimistic homework.
yeah. All right.
Lovely.
Well, that's all from me, Jacqui, and listeners. Lovely session. I hope everyone got something. I'm sure everyone got something out of it one way or another.
Yes,
Keep up the good
beautiful.
work.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you soon. Bye.